You're listening to the Veterans Heritage Hour on the Vets on Media Network.
Good morning, Arizona, and welcome to our listeners from around the globe. My name is Joe Beret.
Dave Lucier.
And this is the Veterans Heritage Hour.
What time is it, Joe?
It's the Veterans Heritage Hour, exactly. On your Rolex GMT Master, you probably have that recorded and dialed in.
GMT.
That's right. Listen, we have a heck of a show for you today. Our guest today is Jim Kelsey, Colonel James Kelsey, with the Electric Strawberry, the 25th Infantry Division, and who made his way later on to a Nazi bunker in Munich, Germany as a spy master. So before we hear from him, David, let's talk about what we have coming up. Just to tease our audience a little bit, we have a couple of shows coming up. We want you to be dialed in next Wednesday and Wednesdays before, but we have another Green Beret coming here. General Friedovich
Dave Friedovich.
3-star general, the top-ranking Green Beret when he retired. We have Lorelei Kelly. Lorelei Kelly worked as a highly classified staffer in the U.S. Senate. And she's now working on a program at Harvard and Stanford, et cetera, of how to enlighten our Congress. So in spite of all the money and PR politics that we make better decisions, particularly when it comes to our troops, because they're life and death situations when it comes to the military. So stay tuned, and we'll be having more posted on our website. We have joining us in the studio today is a professor from the Cronkite School of Journalism, Brian Rackham. He's helping us kind of get this show up and fine-tune it. And hopefully we'll be having some interns in at some point in time. But we're so happy to have everyone in the studio today.
Go Devils.
Including now, I have to introduce Colonel Kelsey here. And these two guys are, David and Jim are both Green Berets, of course. So this is the last few words I'll get in, because they said I was drunk in the club when everything was, when all the fighting was going on. I was in the club drunk and disgusted, and they were doing all the action. So, Colonel Kelsey, I'm going to start off here with you at the University of Rhode Island, where you're just going to be inducted into their ROTC Hall of Fame.
I apparently have outlived most of the really viable candidates, and I'm thrilled at that. I also want to tell you how pleased I am to be here. As I have said to Barbara when I've been
Barbara Hatch, our founder.
Barbara Hatch at Cactus Shadows, and the opportunity for us to tell our story in any form is unique. In this form, this will live a lot longer than I ever will. And I encourage everybody to contact you in the Veteran Heritage Hour and get an opportunity to tell their story, because it's not so much about me. It's about the life I lived and the people I interacted with. But more importantly, it's for your kids and your grandkids and their kids and grandkids. Someday when they see your name somewhere, they can click on a link and see what you were, what you did, and hopefully they'll be proud of you. And that's why this program and programs like it are so important.
Well, listening to you makes everyone proud. You're the great representative from the United States Army, which you love so much, and who's, the time you put in and really at the tippy end of the spear in both the Cold War and in the hot war in Vietnam.
Well, that wasn't the way I kind of expected it to play out. The only course I was ever good at in college was ROTC. Fortunately, we got a grade for ROTC, and that got me up over the 2.0 mark for most of my academic career. So when I graduated, I was lucky enough to be given a regular Army
distinguished military graduate.
Distinguished military grad. Nothing distinguished about my time at the university, but
well, you were president of a fraternity.
Vice president.
I'm sorry.
But all of my friends who will watch this will know, so I have to be really careful, and because they'll hit that bullshit button on me in a heartbeat. and so will my wife, by the way, who knows
Come on,
everything. And
she's trying to shoot
She
me.
knows where all the skeletons.
and for 49 years, almost 49 years, has known when to hit the bullshit button off. But I graduated. I had the opportunity to pick a branch. And when you were a regular Army selectee, you had to pick one of the combat arms or the engineer branch. I wasn't smart enough to be an engineer, and my father was an armor officer, graduated from West Point, class of 40, was killed in 44.
Jim has the telegram here. We just saw the telegram, which notified his parents of their your
grandfather got the telegraph. My mom was out west at the time.
Delivered by a taxi cab. That's how my mom learned about my brother's wounds, and that's how it was done. A taxi cab.
Just a telegram. World War II.
Yeah,
and
Vietnam.
So anyway, I don't know why I didn't go into the armor. Maybe because I was too afraid to follow in father's footsteps. Mm-hmm. My stepfather was a Naval Academy graduate, class of 42, and he encouraged me to go into the Army because I wasn't smart enough to go into the Navy. And so I graduated, selected infantry, went to the Benning School for Boys, then went to jump school. And I was fortunate. I got the pick of assignments. I mean, you could put in your list of where you want to go, and I picked Hawaii, the 25th Infantry Division.
Not that dumb. I think
I thought, boy, I'd seen all the movies, beaches, great time, etc. And I got there on the 8th of November, 1965. Wow. And the Army was different than it is today. Of course, it was a drafted Army, first of all. Second, but that was only in the enlisted force. And in the 25th Division, if you were a sergeant or above and you were from the islands, Guam, Hawaiian Islands, any of the Samoan Islands, etc., you could, every other tour, you could come back to Hawaii. So the 25th, from an NCO standpoint, was populated by Hawaiians and Samoans. And most of those people had been in the Korean War. My platoon sergeant, Cornelio Pele, was, as it turned out when we went to Vietnam, his third war. He'd been in World War II as a code breaker or code talker because he was Samoan and they used Samoans to talk back and forth to confuse the Japanese.
Much like the Navajos did for the Marine Corps.
That's correct. And then he was in the 187th RCT
in
Korea. And then
Regimental Combat Team for you listeners out there.
And then he was obviously in A Company, first of the 35th Infantry, the Cacti Green, to be specific. So I got there on the 8th of November. And typical second lieutenant, knew nothing, we were in a training mode in those days. We had a brig, so we had lots of people in the brig. And I think I had about 26 people in my 44-man platoon. The rest of them were all either on special duty for sports. We had lots of professional football players, basketball players, because that's how they did their service. They did it all in Hawaii. And then we had a lot of guys that just got in trouble downtown, and away they went into the jail for short periods of time. And then about the first week of December, I'm out on a fishing boat, getting absolutely deathly ill with a bunch of my other second lieutenant buddies. I come back. There's a note on the BOQ that says report immediately to the company. I go to the company. And I'm told the division is deploying to Vietnam immediately.
And you knew where it was, actually?
Not really. To be brutally honest, the war was out of thought, out of mind. So we started to do a train up. We only had about 2.5 weeks to get ready. And as it turned out, we had no clue the way we trained as the way we actually fought.
This was 1965.
1965. So the day before New Year's, I left in a 141 with my rifle platoon out of Hawaii, and the 141 broke down in Guam. And we just sat there. We were headed to Pleiku. We were the Lost Brigade, it was called. And I had and Pete Ewing will probably watch this. Pete had the first platoon in as part of the advanced party. I came in with the first regular company that went into Pleiku. And so we got there on a C-124 Bumblebee, New Year's Eve, 1965, and never had a C-124 land at Pleiku before. And we're about, I don't know, 10 miles out, and a crew chief comes back and says, the air base is under fire. You need to prepare to evacuate the aircraft as soon as we land. We're going to run down the runway. We're going to do an immediate spin. We're going to open the bow, because these were the old clamshell doors, and we're going to push all of the ammunition we have out, and you're going to go into the fight. And well, we had M14s in those days, and we did not travel with any ammunition, but we had ammunition in the airplane. It was all in crates. So we break the crates out, and we're trying, it's all linked, M60 ammunition. So we are tearing the rounds off and trying to pump them into our, and I think by the time they landed, we had about 10 rounds per person. And I'm looking out these little porthole windows, and I can see all this smoke coming up. And then we have the Cobra gunships going down the side, and I said, "Oh, this is tremendous."
That was a major attack.
Yeah, it was a
major attack.
Yeah, it was a major attack. All right, we do exactly what he said: run down the runway, spin around, doors open, we push everything out, and we come filing out, running out, hit the ground, and there are all these guys standing around Air Force in shorts. Some of them are holding a beer. They're looking at these idiots, and I'm on the ground, and I've got, my weapon out, etc. That was my introduction to Vietnam, and I had 44 young kids.
It's not a good day when the Air Force is laughing at you. That's not a good day.
As it turned out, the fires that I saw were charcoal fires. The gunships that I saw outside, they were coming back to refuel. And so, you learn the hard way sometimes in life. I will top that off by, remember, we went in as a unit, and we came home as a unit on the 27th of November, 1966, on a 141. And of those 44 young men, 8 of them walked on the aircraft with me.
No.
The rest of them came home in other ways. Not all, most of them were not killed. Mm-hmm. Some were, unfortunately, but the rest were injured severely enough that they had to.
And generally, what was your AO, your area of operation during that first
tour? Was all we started our first operation Bonamy Tuit, which in the Central Highlands, but most of the time. We operated in and out along the Special Forces camps along the tri-border area of Laos and Cambodia.
Were you in the same area, David?
Exactly. I were in that area, it was Dak To at the time, and then they moved it closer to the border and named it Ben Het, and we usually called it Ben Hit because everybody got hit up there. But,
it was all North Vietnamese.
Yep. Yeah, all in.
Tell us about the first time, all this great training and infantry training, and you're out in your first time in combat.
Well, I would tell you that, and I can only speak for myself, because everybody's experience is totally different. And as I said, it probably shows I'm not movie material, because first time I captured the first North Vietnamese soldier that the 25th had, ran into him along a stream bed to the northwest of Pleiku. He indicated that there was a North Vietnamese battalion in the area. So rest of the company came in, and that night we were mortared. And the next morning, Bob Lentz and his platoon were sent to see if they could figure out where the mortars came from. And he followed the stream bed down the stream or down the thing looking for the mortar site, and ran right into that battalion. We'll make a long story short, they got chopped up pretty badly. Next platoon went in, got chopped up. And then I went in, and the words you never want to hear from your company commander is, Kelsey, you're all I've got left. And so he wanted me to flank the North Vietnamese who were just to the north of us along the riverbank. And I moved over to the river. And again, Benning school. Benning taught you certain ways, and you tried to inculcate that into your brain. There's a log across the river that the North Vietnamese used all the time. And so I immediately remembered that you don't cross single file, cross a log that's under fire. You'll lose everybody. So I said, jump into the river, we'll cross that way. First two guys jumped in the river, disappeared. We spent 10 minutes trying to haul our rear ends out of the river, and then we crossed the log single file and moved down opposite. And then the North Vietnamese took us under fire. And as I've said to thousands of officers over the years, you learn real quickly that everything has an order, and whatever you do as an officer, it starts from your decision making on the first order. When you are under fire, you have a number of things that you have to do. One of which is you have to inform your boss what's going on. Another thing is you have to give orders to your people on what you want them to do. Third thing is that you want to use whatever assets you have to bring fire on the enemy. Fourth thing is you want to make sure that those people that you have that have been engaged and wounded or killed are taken care of. And fifth thing is you want to take care of yourself because you're being fired on also. What's the first thing you do? Because everything you do from there cascades down. If you contact your boss, then you haven't taken care of the guys that have been wounded. If you take care of the guys that have been wounded, you haven't contacted your boss, you haven't called in support fires. If you call in support fires first and somebody's shooting at you, you may get wounded. You may be the next person. Which one of those things do you do first? I did all of them badly in the first fight. And I would say to most junior officers, that's what happens. It's so loud. It's so overwhelming. You have people screaming, all of these things that you have. It's a 360-degree war. It's not on the movie screen. It's not where I can look away and there is no war. I can turn the sound volume down. And then you have your own people hurt. And then you have somebody that's trying to kill you. And so you have to, one, dial down that it's not your job to shoot back at the guy that's trying to kill you. It's your guys. Two, you got to find out from your squad leaders what's going on. What are they doing? And so you can give proper orders. Then you got to relay all that information up to the boss.
It all happens at one time, and you're trying to do it all at once.
All at once.
Like I said, I had a fellow tell me one time that a kid asked the fellow I was with giving this presentation. He says, "Well, why didn't you shoot him?" He goes, "I didn't see him." It's just the way it is. It's pandemonium.
Listen, we're going to take a short break here. I don't want to tell you guys what happened to me when I got fired at first, but all the guys who were there are laughing their brains out because I couldn't. I was watching two guys trying to shoot me and kill me, right? And I tried to call into base, and I went, my voice was way up, and everybody was laughing, and I had really lost it. The pilot had to jerk the map out of my hand, and he's crabbing the airplane and doing the mission, and I'm frozen watching these two guys trying to kill me. Interesting. Listen, you're listening to the Veterans Heritage Hour. We'll be right back with Colonel Jim Kelsey, master spy and great storyteller.
Would you like to own a thriving business and help employ local veterans? The Vetraplex Handyman Construction and Landscape business is the opportunity you've been waiting for. The Vetraplex is your gateway to an affordable startup business with 0% financing for qualifying owners. By owning a Vetraplex franchise, you will be hiring veterans, providing them both income and opportunity, while at the same time providing your customers a way to say, thank you for your service to our nation's veterans. For more information, visit vetraplex.org. Again, that's vetraplex.org or call 928-284-2022.
Breaker, 19. How about that bandit? You got them ears on. Have you ever wanted to be a truck driver? If so, pay attention. If not, pay attention anyway. Southwest Truck Driver Training offers everything you need to get started. You can get hired before you begin training. They've got GI Bill approved training facilities, day, night, or weekend programs to fit your busy schedule. And if you have any questions, no sweat. They've got veteran supportive campuses with veterans on staff to serve you. And on top of that, they have lifetime job placement assistance. Put the pedal to the metal. Call Southwest Truck Driver Training today.
Everyone's going to need an attorney at some point in their life. I'm no different. Hey everyone, it's James from Vets On. Whether it was my last will and testament before deployment or my ongoing custody battle for my children during my divorce, I needed help, so I lawyered up. If you need help, I urge you to contact Capstrom Law Firm. Capstrom Law Firm in Springfield, Missouri services clients throughout the state in criminal law, personal injury, and family law. With over 13 years practicing law, Tom Capstrom understands both law and court procedures and how stressful they can be. Let Tom Capstrom Law Firm and his dedicated staff take the stress and worry out of a difficult situation by calling him today. We feel so strong about the work that Tom and his staff are doing that he'll be a monthly guest on the show. Tom is a veteran and a listener, for God's sake, so you know the guy is solid and will fight for you. Give Tom a call today by calling 417-864-0552 or email Tom at capstromlaw.com. And don't forget to tell him that Vets On sent you.
The choice of a lawyer is an important decision and should not be based solely upon advertising.
If you or someone you know is looking for a new job or career, you need to visit the pros. National Career Fairs at ncfairs.com. National Career Fairs hosts over 300 career fairs a year nationwide. The events are free and give you the perfect chance to meet some of the top employers in your area face-to-face. To find the nearest career fair to you, visit ncfairs.com. Again, that's ncfairs.com. What are you waiting for?
You're listening to the Veterans Heritage Hour on the Vets On Media Network.
Welcome back to the Veterans Heritage Hour. You're listening to Jim Kelsey. We're going to continue with him, Colonel, United States Army, retired, former garrison commander at Fort Huachuca, which is the home of Army intelligence. And it's not an oxymoron, as everyone says when I mention that. But he's also served with a 10th Special Forces Group in Germany, highly decorated two-tour veteran of Vietnam, and a spy master. Let's get back with Colonel Kelsey here. So we just heard you talk about the first time you were shot at in Vietnam and your first tour in Vietnam, and then you were selected by the Special Forces people to go to be a Green Beret.
Before we hit that real quickly, I want to just talk for a moment about the 11 Bs of Vietnam, though, that I knew.
11 Bravos, the infantrymen.
The infantrymen. Draftees. My first tour and much of my second tour, these kids did everything that anybody could ever ask of them. And most people don't understand the life that an infantryman had in Vietnam. And I cannot compare it to Afghanistan, Korea, or any other place. But the average kid in Vietnam, first tour, when 65, 66, 67, spent in excess of 270 days in the field. And I am talking a field that's 100 degrees, 110% humidity, that has every known bad bug, snake, animal that exists in
terrain,
this world.
weather.
They averaged at best 2.5 hours sleep a night, and that continues. Never had more than two people in a foxhole, which meant one had to be awake, one wasn't. You can't go immediately right to sleep. So you got maybe an hour, if you're lucky, hour and a half before somebody kicked you and said it's your turn. First tour, we went 6 months without ever having a real meal, ate it all out of cans. First tour, we went 6 months without ever having a shower or ever seeing a toilet. We smelled as bad as you possibly can imagine, except that we all smelled the same, so nobody knew it. The only way I knew I smelled so bad is when I got back and my future wife picked me up at the airport at the end of November and drove me home so for the wedding this is in New York. We drove the entire way with the windows down and for 2 hours. And only years later did she tell me that I smelled so bad that she and her dad would have been sick if they hadn't left the windows all the way down.
Wow.
But that was the life that these kids
Sure.
led. And when you think about the young Vietnam veteran and what happened to them when they came home, these kids lived an existence that nobody could imagine. Were exposed to things that nobody can imagine, and still got up every morning and walked toward the guns, not away from them. And David, you would agree with me. I think the most amazing thing about being a leader in any of the services is the inherent belief by your younger men that you know what's best for them when you order them to go toward the gun, not away from it. And the fact that they do is awesomely inspiring. And knowing how bad I was, and they still did what I asked them to do. But anyway, going back to the Special Forces, I did not volunteer for Special Forces. One day when we were close to the end of my tour, I got a packet of orders and it said, congratulations, you're going to go to the John F. Kennedy School for Special Operations. You're going to go to what is now called the Q course. In those days was called the SF Officers course. And you're going to become a Green Beret. And so when I got back into the United States, right after I got married, we went down to DC. I went into infantry branch and said, why am I going to Special Forces? And they said, because it's going to be great for your career. Now, remember, I've only been in the Army a year and a half. All right. So at this point in time, I'm not thinking career. And then they said the word that I'm sure General Friedovich will talk about at the time, but don't spend more than one tour in it, because it wasn't considered to be something good for
It wasn't a
officers.
branch at that
was
time.
way
It
before
wasn't a
they
branch,
they
that's right.
branched it.
But the NCOs in Special Forces were the best you would
Yes.
ever find. Absolutely brilliant. So I went to the Q course, got assigned to the 10th group in Bad Tolz, Germany. And again, it's like Hawaii.
Mhm.
I lucked out. I mean, I had that interim stop in a hellhole, but then here I am in southern Germany, snow, great beer, great people, just having a blast. And then a year later, I'm back in Vietnam again, commanding an infantry company. I'm 24 years old. And I went from being a really young guy with a lot of experienced NCOs to being a really young guy with no experienced NCOs. At the age of 24, I was the second oldest person in my rifle company. And the Army had flipped. It had lost all its experienced NCOs. It was now bringing in commanders only to get the check mark for commanders.
Mhm.
And
What year was this, Jim?
this was 1968.
Mhm.
And they were not learning. Well, I learned a lot of things about leadership later on in my life and watching what happens when you only have interim leaders who don't know their people and don't get a chance to know.
They
their
were
people.
rotating every 6 months, weren't they?
Every 6 or less,
Yes.
depending upon how fast they had to get in and get out for their next job.
I used to-
From there, I went. That was my last Special Forces assignment, and that was also my last infantry assignment.
in Vietnam.
In Vietnam. I by then I was a father. I had a beautiful young daughter. I have two daughters. I'm very, very fortunate. Spectacular wife, 2 daughters, 4 great grandchildren, 2 great son-in-laws. But I didn't think I would live a third tour, and infantry captains were going back a third tour. I'd been hit in both tours, I applied for military intelligence. I thought this would really be neat, I'd be an attaché or something like that. Really super cool. And I went to the intelligence advanced course. My problem was that I'd already been to Vietnam twice, so instead of learning a trade, they used me for because Vietnam was still going on, to teach how intelligence works in Vietnam. And so I never learned a trade in intelligence school until later on when I went to the Strategic Signals Intelligence course. But I had the best of all worlds. After my tour at Huachuca, my first tour at Huachuca,
What's his officer basic school or
no, this was
advanced course?
I was an instructor in the advanced course, Company Commander, and then I went off to Leavenworth, went to Command General Staff College. From there, I went to the Pentagon as a captain. Captains in the Pentagon were a rare breed, believe me. And I went to foreign liaison. I was responsible for all the visitors of to the United, all the foreign visitors from the 69 countries that were represented in Washington, and that's how I got to know Charlie Beckwith. Because it was my job at the time to bring in people to assist at that time the formulation of our special operations special elements. And they were being assisted in their training by the SAS from the United Kingdom and GSG-9 out of the UK, which were both considered to be superior special operating forces. And they wouldn't travel without their weapons. And bringing foreign soldiers into the United States, carrying their weapons on commercial airlines is always a unique thing.
No, Charlie Beckwith, just tell our audience who Charlie Beckwith was.
Charlie Beckwith was the leader of the raid into the first raid into Iran that unfortunately went south, and then eventually created the superb fighting force that we have now that's called the Delta Force. And unique individual. I can't say on the air what he usually called me. It always began with an F and it ended with an ing. And
flying.
And it was always
flying Jim Kelsey.
Yeah, and it was always at a very, very high volume. So I got to know what they were doing and got to assist a little bit in getting them to where they were, a very small part. From there, I went to Korea. That's where I got my only training in intelligence I was going to be the executive officer to a signals intelligence unit, landed in Korea, found out I'd been traded away for 2 draft choices, got sent up to Uijeonbu to be the chief intel officer for the Combined Field Army. Got to know the North Koreans extremely well.
Really?
That was a tour that made my career. From there, I came out on the battalion command list, got to take over counterintelligence battalion. Counterintelligence are the spy catchers. The Army has the largest number of those in the military, and I had the largest number in the Army.
In Korea?
No, it's now in Germany.
You're back in Germany.
I'm back in Germany, and I'll give you a story. First of all, I'll give you one story about how life is. I went in to see my new brigade commander. I said, can't believe how excited I am to take over this counterintelligence battalion, especially since I'm not a counterintelligence officer. And he looked at me and he said, you're not? So what I found out was that that was a totally different aspect of life than the infantry. I used to call them my princes in polyester because they didn't wear a uniform. They wore civilian clothes, and we gave them a clothing allowance. And I swear to God, what I needed in the battalion at the time was a clothing advisor, because you gave a young man $300 and said, go buy a suit. And he comes back out with a day glow. This is the days of, of Saturday Night Fever.
Yeah.
John Travolta and Saturday Night
and I
Live.
said, this is not what you need when you're doing a clandestine surveillance. But I'll give you people you see a lot in movies, and I wish it was you could always do it in 2 hours, but you can't. In 1982, a man walked into my office and said, we have some information that the Soviet Union has a copy of the war plan. We started to, because counterintelligence, that's our job, is to find out who would have provided the information. We put a team together. We had 320,000 suspects in 1982. I was very fortunate enough to be commanding the brigade back in Germany in 1988, when the German counterintelligence organization, with our assistance, broke into a house and put a 9mm pistol upside the head of an Army master sergeant. We went from 320,000 to 1 in 6 years.
He was our own guy?
He was our own guy. Actually, he had several other people, our own people, working with him.
For money?
For money. Most U.S., my experience, gentlemen, is that most people commit espionage against this country for money. Most people that we recruit for espionage to help us do it for other reasons. They do it for love of their family, mostly. They want to have a better life for their family, or unhappiness with the regime that they're currently occupying. But most Americans who commit espionage against this country do it for money.
A fellow by the name of Ames, which I think you're
Aldrich Ames
with.
was a classic example, a CIA, senior CIA man. And I had some experience with Aldrich Ames when he was in Italy. I can't speak a lot of that, but I can tell you that the rules are that we in the Army and in the military conduct no intelligence operations that are not cleared with our National Intelligence Organization. We're not rogues. We don't go off on our own. It would be nice to do it at times, I think, but we don't. We clear it through proper channels. And so we had to brief all of those human operations that we conducted, and we did a number of those. And Aldrich Ames was in the briefing scheme of things at the time, and we sent a number of people east to work for the United States, have been properly vetted. These were all foreigners. These were not, when I say foreigners, these were not U.S. citizens as we would know. These were people we had recruited and asked them to go provide viable intelligence back to us. And none of them ever returned.
And Aldrich Ames was the guy.
Aldrich Ames was knowledgeable on all of them, and it was part later on of all that he turned over.
One of my classmates at the Kennedy School was a CIA employee, and he spent the last couple of years of his tour with the CIA trying to uncover all the damage that Aldrich Ames had done, which was considerable.
He just think of it this way. If you have somebody in the hen house, you're in pretty good shape. Okay. If you're the fox already in the hen house, more than likely you can get all the chickens. And that's what they had. And I have one more story I'll tell you after the break.
We're going to come back in a few minutes. I think Colonel Kelsey had a armor-plated limousine, and he had security guards, and he had a price on his head, and he was operating out of an SS bunker in Munich, Germany. More from Colonel Kelsey when we come back. Stay tuned. This is the Veterans Heritage Hour.
Everyone's going to need an attorney at some point in their life. I'm no different. Hey, everyone, it's James from Vets On. Whether it was my last will and testament before deployment or my ongoing custody battle for my children during my divorce, I needed help, so I lawyered up. If you need help, I urge you to contact Capstrom Law Firm. Capstrom Law Firm in Springfield, Missouri services clients throughout the state in criminal law, personal injury, and family law. With over 13 years practicing law, Tom Capstrom understands both law and court procedures and how stressful they can be. Let Tom Capstrom Law Firm and his dedicated staff take the stress and worry out of a difficult situation by calling him today. We feel so strong about the work that Tom and his staff are doing that he'll be a monthly guest on the show. Tom is a veteran and a listener, for God's sake, so you know the guy is solid and will fight for you. Give Tom a call today by calling 417-864-0552 or email Tom at capstromlaw.com. And don't forget to tell him that Vets On sent you.
The choice of a lawyer is an important decision and should not be based solely upon advertising.
Breaker 19. How about that bandit? You got some ears on, son?
Have you ever wanted to be a truck driver? If so, pay attention. If not, pay attention anyway. Southwest Truck Driver Training offers everything you need to get started. You can get hired before you begin training, They've got GI Bill approved training facilities, day, night, or weekend programs to fit your busy schedule. And if you have any questions, no sweat. They've got veteran supportive campuses with veterans on staff to serve you. And on top of that, they have lifetime job placement assistance. Put the pedal to the metal. Call Southwest Truck Driver Training today.
If you or someone you know is looking for a new job or career, you need to visit the pros. National Career Fairs at ncfairs.com. National Career Fairs hosts over 300 career fairs a year nationwide. The events are free and give you the perfect chance to meet some of the top employers in your area face-to-face. To find the nearest career fair to you, visit ncfairs.com. Again, that's ncfairs.com. What are you waiting for?
Would you like to own a thriving business and help employ local veterans? The Vetraplex Handyman Construction and Landscape business is the opportunity you've been waiting for. The Vetraplex is your gateway to an affordable startup business with 0% financing for qualifying owners. By owning a Vetraplex franchise, you will be hiring veterans, providing them both income and opportunity, while at the same time providing your customers a way to say, thank you for your service to our nation's veterans. For more information, visit vetraplex.org. Again, that's vetraplex.org or call 928-284-2022.
You're listening to the Veterans Heritage Hour on the Vets on Media Network.
Welcome back to the Veterans Heritage Hour. We're joined today with Colonel Jim Kelsey, Master Spy. Jim, take us back to the bunker in Munich, Germany. How did you get working in a Nazi bunker in Germany? That's fascinating.
Well, I was very fortunate to be selected by the Army to command the 66th Military Intelligence Brigade, which was housed in SS Kaserne in Munich, 7 floors to the building.
In the basement, down.
All the way down, yeah. Several of the floors were flooded. The U.S. Army flooded the place at the end of World War II because they didn't want to. They just didn't want to investigate, so they just poured water down. But I had the largest office in the Army.
Above water.
Above water. It was 22 steps from the front door to my office to the front of my desk. And I know that because remember I said I had a battalion in that brigade. And when you're called to the carpet to get a chewing out by the brigade commander, it is a long walk from that door to the front of the desk.
22 of them.
22 of them, especially if he's in that high back chair and he swiveled it around so he's not facing you. He can hear you coming because I use that to my own advantage later on. But I want to say right up front, though, I want everybody to understand, I didn't do any of this.
Come on.
No, on my job, I was the commander. I'm responsible for it all. Assign assets, put money where it is. But it was the real stars of the show, the guys and gals. And by the way, military intelligence is absolutely superb for women. It's the hardest branch in the Army to get into. And if you look at the general officer ranks, our ladies have done extremely well because they just perform brilliantly. But one more espionage story. We had another American soldier committing espionage, this time working for the East Germans, again for money. Twice he was found with bags of money, and both times he talked his way out of it. And but when we did catch up with him and we did arrest him, during his debriefing, he complained that he could take so much secret information out of where he was working that it overwhelmed his case officer, and the way he would pass the information. And if you've seen movies, you can understand this. He would be walking down the street. There'd be a car parked. The window would be partially rolled down, and he would just slide it into the window and keep on walking. Well, he at times would have so much information, the window wasn't slid down far enough. And he'd have to knock on the window and get the guy to roll the window down. Fortunately, we found him, and he's certainly enjoying his time at the disciplinary barracks at Leavenworth.
Did we have Soviet spies who were giving us information like that?
No, we don't have as many. I mean, there's a couple of young men here who have served in the military in the room, and they'll remember and you would remember it too, the subversion, Shaida training, subversion, espionage. Remember if you're in a bar and some young lady sidles up to you and starts asking you questions about your unit, et cetera, you're supposed to report that, et cetera. And we used to
Which unit is that?
Yeah, we used to brief that to everybody, and I used to get, because we were responsible for, I used to get upset. I said, there can't possibly be that many spies that the other guys have, because I knew how many we had, how difficult it was for us to get somebody to work the other side. Well, when the wall came down and we had access to the East German files, the West Germans allowed us to do that. We found they had thousands of people in West Germany reporting to them, thousands. We could count hundreds for us.
Sure.
They had thousands, we had hundreds.
So why did they have a price on your head?
Oh, just because we had all the counterterrorism guys.
So you were like the third in command, or
No, well, I was just the third guy at the time on the list. They had the SINK, the commander-in-chief of a Eastern 7th Army, and my boss, the two-star general, the chief of intelligence, and then I was third. And as a result of that, I had a armored car and I had a protective service detail, more for all the visitors that came to Munich.
Sure.
I mean, we averaged a visitor, a 4-star a week. We had a 2-star.
Where were they all coming from?
Oh, everywhere. Who wouldn't want to come to Munich on all expense paid trip? All right. The beer's great.
Oh.
And the sites are unique.
Where was this bunker? Was it in Munich underneath Old Town, or where was it?
No. It was on the outskirts.
Outskirts of town.
Just right on the outskirts of a place called Perlacher Forst.
Mm-hmm.
And straddled what was the Autobahn. You could walk underneath the Autobahn from building to building. That's how big the concern was. Never bombed.
Well, that was too deep to hit, wasn't it?
What?
It was too deep to hit with anything we had at the time in World War II, wasn't it?
Well, I don't know. I imagine we could have made life. But anyway, they just never did. And,
what did they use it for, the Nazis?
They had an SS headquarters there. It was all part of, when I first took command in 88, we still had and used houses that we had taken over after World War II that had been claimed by the United States as our property in Germany for whatever purposes. The IG Farben building was a classic example. We purposely never bombed that because it was determined that we would use that as our headquarters in Germany once we won. And so anyway, we had houses throughout Germany that we used for a variety of intelligence purposes. Eventually, we gave them all back. And the Army withdrew from Munich about 4 years after I left in 1990. But we still have a large intelligence presence, obviously, and they do good work. I was there, was fortunate. I had about 3,000 people in 108 locations in Europe. When the wall came down, now we never saw at least I'm going to state that we did not predict that the wall would come down until right before it did.
Sure.
Although when the refugees started to pile out through Czechoslovakia in particular, we knew something was untoward. But when I got there in July of 88 and went up to Berlin to see my units in Berlin the first time, the wall was up. If I'd stood in a certain place, I would have been dead.
Sure.
When I gave up command in July of 1990, couldn't even find the wall where I stood.
Mm-hmm.
That was the difference. In 88, we would have given asylum to a Russian specialist from a tank battalion here in the United States just to get his information. When I left in July of 1990, we wouldn't have given asylum to the commander of the group of Soviet forces. We had, matter of fact, this is a joke, but I said one time we needed the Goodyear blimp to come over before the wall had come down, but to fly along the wall with a sign that said defect now while we're still paying. Because at the end, we had a lot of people come forth and we would say, no, we have enough nuclear scientists. We don't need you. Or we have enough of these or whatever. But all of us, the three of us, when you look at where we started in 1966 or 65 or whenever, we never thought that by 1990, the enemy that we lived our entire life against would be basically fragmented, broken up, and gone. I thought I would live my entire life with the Soviet Union looming over us at the Fulda Gap, ready to come pounding down and take over Germany. As it turned out, when the wall came down and we got a chance to look at them, they couldn't have gotten 50 miles into them.
No, I got working in the former Soviet Union after the wall came down. And the disrepair of everything was just remarkable. Everything that had moving parts didn't work. It was incredible, the waste and the malfunctioning equipment. That whole society was kind of just busted and broke. They couldn't get across the street. It didn't seem to me.
No, and you're absolutely right. I had, when the wall came down and the East Germans came out in a flood looking for work. And I remember in Industrials in Munich, I was sitting at the Oktoberfest about 5 months after the wall had come down. And, or no, I guess it was about 10 months. And I said, how are the workers? Did you get a lot of workers? He said, well, I don't have any anymore. I said, what do you mean? And he said, well, in East Germany, Czechoslovakia, Hungary, on Monday, the truck would roll up with lumber and nails, etc. And by Tuesday, you were done. You would sit there and on the job and have beer, and because you'd used all the materials that had been allotted to you. And then come maybe Thursday or Friday, you might get some more, but you might not. He said, well, as the guys who used to say to me when they would quit, and I'd ask them why, so the common vernacular was, well, you never run out of nails. Because they physically were unable to do 8 hours worth of work 5 days a week because they had never done that.
Yeah.
But I've always used that because you never run out of nails.
So we've heard a lot of history here, a lot of great stories. And we're a show that kind of goes from, military history to, the future of warfare. What do you see in the future here with all your background experience? What do you see going forward? We've got a few more minutes here, I think 3 or 4 minutes.
Sure.
Well, it's just, again, my personal opinion.
Sure.
I think the world, we the United States are in deep trouble. We are in a war, regardless of how you want to categorize it. We have an enemy who is trying to kill us in as large a number as is possible with whatever weapons he can acquire. And in my definition, that's a war. And yet we are fighting it as if it's a convenience store robbery. We are making the Toyota dealers very happy with the bombing. We blow up a Toyota 4 or 5 times a day with some unfortunate people in it, but we're not getting at the heart of the problem. The leadership is not being threatened. We haven't been able to get at them. We've eviscerated our human intelligence capability. Now, this is a threat that's enormously hard to get at. I mean, this is not something where you can just walk a guy that looks like you, me, or Joe into Syria and say, hey, I'd like to find the leader of ISIS and put a tracking device on. I mean, this is an enormously difficult problem that has no easy solutions, and our form of government precludes finding a good solution because we change our philosophy either every 4 years or every 2 years.
You know, we're going to hopefully you're going to come back. Tell us about you have a distinguished classmate or alumni from your Rhode Island that you're going to be inducted with come later on this year.
Well, he's already in.
He's in?
The Honorable Thomas O'Connell, former Assistant Secretary of Defense for Special Operations Low Intensity Conflict. Tom I recruited him as a fraternity brother. He was 3 years behind me at the University of Rhode Island. Lieutenant General Mike Flynn, who you may,
yes,
former DIA, is also University of Rhode Island. Obviously, University of Rhode Island produces some really classic or unique individuals.
Well, it seems to be. I didn't know the Rams. I didn't know the Rams were spitting out all our counterintelligence professionals here.
And Tom is because he was confirmed by the Senate for the rest of his life, will be called the Honorable. Now, he and I go back so far that I have great difficulty with that. And I tell him about that, but one of the greatest Americans one will ever find.
Well, we want to get him on the radio. What we want to do here is we have 1 minute left, but I'll just cut out that OC will be on the show one time with a call in the Honorable. You will be here when maybe we get General Frutovich, who's going to be on the show in March. But we want to get a little conference going here, a little discussion about, because we're interested in the Cronkite School of Journalism, but also the Center for the Study of Warfare at ASU. And so we want to opine on, we want to use a veterans analysis, so to speak, to talk about what these scholars are talking about or thinking about as our future. And you hit the nail right on the head with your comments about the current crisis we're in. Well, you've been listening to the Veterans Heritage Hour. We've had a great show with Jim Kelsey, and I want to thank my partner, David, and all the listeners. Tune in next week. We'll have a special guest. It'll be up on our website. We'll be on our Facebook. He's sick right now. He has a little case of pneumonia, so I'm hoping we can get this man out and cured up and at our site here. Thank you so much. We'll talk to you next week. This is Joe Brett and Dave Lucero with Colonel Jim Kelsey.
Thank you.
Can you see by the dawn